Hello again, folks, and I really am lost with which number we're on now. I think we're either on 11 or 12, but I'm going to stop with that one. And welcome to the latest episode of our Dharma Outreach Dharma Talks. And we're very fortunate this week to have not only one but two very special guests, certainly very special for me. We have Jim and Natalie joining us from Indiana.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, guys, for agreeing to do this for me, or for
It's
us.
good to be
Yeah,
here.
thank you so much.
Pleasure.
And
Our pleasure.
I'm kind of hoping that maybe we'll bring a bit of intellectualism, which is not I can't even say the word, let alone. So this is obviously we usually deal with Dharma related recovery matters, but I was particularly wanting to get you guys on because you are, to me, the ideal example of actually living out the teachings, not just Buddhist teachings, not just Dharma teachings, but other teachings as well. So I guess maybe we should stick with the kind of Dharma related subjects first. I first found, or you guys found me when I was in Michigan, and you were very kind to me there. Could I ask just a little bit about how you came to be interested in Buddhist teachings, Dharma teachings in general?
Well, I'll start, Graham. I was first introduced to Buddhism when my grandmother, my beloved grandmother, gave me a book on Buddhism and meditation when I was like 19 or something, and a book on comparative religion, which she was very interested in, and kind of hit and miss throughout the years since then, quite a few years. I've continued to be intrigued by Buddhism and in my own way to try to follow the path with varying success at times. I've had little contact with formal Buddhist communities, so I've been kind of a self-taught solo practitioner for these years, but I do my best to meditate, although I like to be more regular about that or more structured with that, and to try to practice in developing to be a better person and a better follower of Buddha as well as other spiritual teachers.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Okay, my background goes into the martial arts arena, where before and after traditional classes, we would spend a little bit of time meditating. And there was a saying in one of the systems that I studied in that the only time we meditated was when we were too tired to stand up. But we did spend time meditating, concentration on breath, concentration on visualization and things of that nature. And then I also read a few books on Zen Buddhism. And then a while back, about 7 years ago, a little bit more than that now, my wife passed away. And subsequently, I met Natalie, and she introduced me to Theravada Buddhism. And then we visited a number of Buddhist temples and meditation centers. And there was nothing real close to us. And we found out about this Theravada Buddhist monk that was in Niles, Michigan, and that's how we located Sujito.
Thank you. Now, I don't want to kind of embarrass you at all, but you guys have been when I was in Michigan, you guys were very, very kind to me with traditional support with Dharma, and I actually find that to almost be the exception rather than the rule. So, firstly, I'd like to again express my gratitude for that. But how important do you guys feel that actually practicing what is written, how important do you feel that is for you personally?
I think it depends on what part of the writings we're talking about, I know this isn't the actual canon, but one of the things that really inspires me is the Dalai Lama's statement that, I think I'm paraphrasing probably incorrectly, but that kindness is my religion and is the most important aspect of practice. And I think you find that throughout the Pali Canon and throughout the Buddhist tradition. So I think we've known people that had encyclopedic memories and could quote suttas and, had quite extensive knowledge. And that can be a good backdraft to our practice, but you can also get caught in that, and it can turn into a sea of words with very little wisdom. So I think it's useful, but to a point.
I think practice is absolutely essential. And without it, everything is simply theoretical at best, and maybe hypocritical at worst. And my background is primarily studying the scriptures, the Bible, and modeling after Jesus himself. And he was all about practice. He was about applying what they would refer to as Torah, the insight or the instruction, the law. And when you look at the way the New Testament, as it's called, I'm not crazy about that particular term, but you have the four Gospels, and then you have the book of Acts, which in Aramaic and Greek is praxis, practice. You don't have a book of theology. You have putting things into action. And even in the Hebrew and Aramaic language, the word for God is oftentimes looked upon as a verb more than a noun, because it's about action, it's about life. So one of the things that impressed me about Natalie is we kid around about her being a bodhisattva wannabe. she's a very kind person, and very compassionate. And I see that loving kindness coming out of her, and that makes the world a difference to me. It wouldn't matter what religion she practices, because her living life is her testimony. And for that reason, I think practice is absolutely essential.
Thank you. I mean, I so fully agree with you about that actually acting in certain ways is far better than being able to recite untold amounts of scripture, whatever it might be. And I've often said that I see people acting in almost what would be described as an almost perfect Buddhist manner, who have no idea about Buddhism or not. I mean, I'm kind of, as I think most people know, I'm kind of off of the word Buddhism at the minute. If asked, I'll usually tell people I'm a Dharma practitioner. I have my own issues with the establishment, with all establishments, as everyone that's watching and yourselves obviously know. But I certainly agree that it's that the actual putting into practice is far more important. And if I could just say, Jim, I want to thank you so much for your Tuesday nights, because they have actually changed my view on so many things for the better. So I just want to thank you for that before I forget. And
You're very welcome.
well, I think that's one of the. I am not, as everyone knows, I'm not a big lover of scholars. I'm a I'm a meditator and not a scholar. But I've certainly benefited from your scholastic prowess. So thank you.
Thank you.
Marshall, if you could, sorry, I'm hogging the.
Well,
seat.
I'm really glad that both of you are here, Jim and Natalie, and I'm really excited about this. A little bit overwhelmed, because I can just tell from your presence that not only are you well educated, but you're just naturally compassionate people, and it's just really, it gives me a good feeling. And when Sujatu and myself, we set out to apply this program, this Dharma Outreach. It has been a struggle, and we're actually getting ready to kick off another program that's going to be modeled after Dharma Outreach. It's going to be Christian Outreach, and the sentiment and the practice is going to be bringing the practicalities, as we do with Buddhism, to disadvantaged populations and people that don't have access or might not have ready access to these teachings. Bring these Christian practicalities and teachings from practitioners to disadvantaged populations, so not only can they learn but gain access to different Christian resources. And I spent my time studying Christianity. That was something I really dug into at a certain point in my life, and I still hold a lot of those teachings in my heart. And it was a saving grace for me, and it was part of my process, as is Buddhism. And there's a lot of synchronicity between the two if you really dig into it. And this is why it's such a pleasure to have you both here to bring up the topic of Christianity and the practicality of it and the practice. So I guess I'll ask a question, because that's what we do, is we share with people. How do you feel like with the Christian practice and the Buddhist practice, what are the similarities, and what do you feel like, where do you feel like it deviate on certain points?
Do you want to do that, or you want me to?
I think there's a lot of similarities. I think that Jesus himself, and I'll defer to Jim mostly on this, but Jesus himself was a very simple, humble, loving man. I think a lot different than the one we meet in many traditional churches. And I think that's entirely congruent with Buddhism. I think the thing that differs is kind of the ultimate goal, although perhaps it's really not such a stretch if we really understood these faiths. But, Buddhism with Nibbana as the goal, and Christianity with, the individual soul continuing to a state of grace, I guess I'll say, as a goal. There is some seeming difference there.
I think one of the things that is very important to me, and I know Graham has been subjected to this quite a bit on Tuesday night, is that I separate I look at Jesus through a different lens than I look at Christianity, per se. And I look at the scriptures through a different lens than New Testament, Old Testament divisions. So consequently, I've gone out of my way to study with rabbis and Jewish teachers as well as Christians. And I put a lot of pieces together that are not normally put together, unfortunately. So a lot of people go around thinking that Jesus and the Apostle Paul were Christians when they were really Jews. And at the time of Jesus, looking at the Silk Road, going all the way from India up into Mesopotamia, and even maybe as far as Greece, with places like Jerusalem and Babylon and Antioch and Alexandria being exposed to Buddhism and vice versa, where the cultures were exchanged, and especially through the language of Aramaic, where Christian missionaries went all the way down into India and as far as China, speaking Aramaic. There's even a monument in China with Chinese and Mongolian and Aramaic language on it. There was a lot of exchange of ideas. And when I look at Jesus, and I was thinking about this specifically for this particular talk that we're having today, is that Jesus's teachings begin in the Sermon on the Mount. At least that's what it's called. In Luke, it's the Sermon on the Plain. If you look at what he's really telling his listeners, whether they be his close disciples or the crowds that followed him around, he's about relieving them from suffering. He's giving them very practical ideas on human relationships. And he begins with humility. He begins with, blessed are those who are poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of God. And then as he explains the kingdom of God, he talks about it being among them. It's not like something that's far off. It's something that they can achieve right now, even in the midst of a Roman occupation, even in the midst of divisions, because at that time there were at least 17 different types of Judaism going on, and many of them were at odds with one another. And getting past things like the abuses in the temple with the money changers and stuff like that, and really getting down to earth, talking to the people about how they can achieve blessings in their life instead of going through the pain. And a lot of that had to do with caring for one another and loving kindness toward one another and justice. Justice was emphasized heavily. It's unfortunate that later, when his teachings, through Paul primarily, went northward into Asia Minor, into Greece, and into Rome, that it got blended with other cultures that emphasize ritual and iconography and things like that, instead of the practical aspects of day-to-day life. So when I look at Jesus and his teachings, and I compare it with what I was brought up with in various churches, beginning with the Roman Catholic and then Protestant churches, I see a deviation from his original emphasis, which I find very bothersome. And I think you can see the same thing in Buddhism, where some of the monks emphasize charity and taking care of others, but more of the monks emphasize chanting and statues and a lot of bright temples, and all that is fine, but let's not forget about the main thing. And the when I go back to the very first book in the Bible, it wasn't the Temple of Eden, it was the Garden of Eden. It's about natural things and everyday mundane life, but bringing, whether we call it God, whatever God is, because God is ineffable. You can't really define God, although people try theologically. Bringing joy and love and peace and things like relief from pain, even in the midst of pain. Like concentrating, like I know of Navy SEALs who have concentrated on meditation and breathing, to overcome the stress and strain that they're going through when they're either going through rigorous training or even in combat. To teach people those kind of things. I've had numerous comments about me, both good and bad, over the years, but one that I really take home to my heart is when I was meeting with a graduating class of homeless people who were at this Christian mission, and I was the the guest speaker, and we went to lunch afterwards. And one of the men said that the thing that he got from me was the ability to take complex ideas and bring them down into simple, everyday, practical life. And I think that's the kind of thing that you see in people like Thich Nhat Hanh and other Buddhists who can see the blend between Jesus and Buddha.
I think that's really interesting. Thank you for that, Jim, because I've always said that folks concentrate too much on the differences, whatever they may be. In this case, we'll talk about the Buddha and Christ. People talk about too much of the differences rather than concentrating on the similarities. And I think if we spent more time not trying to pick out the differences, life in general would probably be a lot better. I don't know. And just one other thing that you said earlier on, you said about taking from not just taking from one source, taking from here and there. I so much agree with that. I've often said that, you know, this life of ours, whatever it might be, is a puzzle, and that we're certainly never gonna find all the pieces out of the same box. So I completely agree with that. It's a little bit, and I see it a fair bit. It's a little bit sad when people want to concentrate on the differences and not the similarities. To be honest with you, for sure.
I think, you know, one of my teachers put it this way. He says, when you look at the Earth, the globe, when you look at, like, if you were in a plane or in a outer space and you're looking at the planet, you don't see boundaries between countries. You don't see boundaries between states. You see land, you see mountains, you see rivers, you see lakes, you see oceans, you see all these natural things. And what we've done as human beings, unfortunately, is we've created exclusivity, where we have the idea that we, you know, rhetorically, we have the idea that our religion is better than somebody else's. And that's very unfortunate, because I'll give you an example from Aramaic. When Jesus said, "Be ye therefore perfect," that's the way it's usually translated. The word in Aramaic for perfect there is gemera, and it means open and complete, inclusive. And it's in the context, if anyone wants to look up that verse, it's in the context of accepting other people, even if they're different from you. And that's a very important teaching. I've seen that among the Buddhist monks that I respect, that they're very open to other religions. They're very open to discussion, and they don't criticize. They don't get into exclusivity. And I've seen that in some of the Christians, especially in some of the traditional churches, like some of the Roman Catholics, for example, and some Protestants. But there's an element in Christianity that says, no, we're the only way. All the other ways are false. And they don't even know how to look at the other ways, because they interpret them based on their own belief system instead of engaging with the others' belief systems. And they really miss out on a lot when they do that. They don't have the opportunity then to enjoy the diversity that exists. And some of them even hate that word diversity. And that's very, very unfortunate, because that's not what Jesus was about.
And you mentioned there about divisions between countries, this, that, and the other. I mean, one of the biggest things that's notable to me, obviously, is the division between people that are in the same, never mind the same country, in the same town, or even in the same building.
Right.
You know, and we obviously do what we can with folks that I usually say are from disadvantaged populations. And that's very prevalent there, although some of the, and some of the most, again, I think I've mentioned this, is some of the folks that act in the most kind of, I'll stick with Buddhist, in the most Buddhist way, have no idea about anything to do with Buddhism at all. They're just decent people. They're just decent people, and I think that's really what it comes down to.
Yeah.
Sorry, I've spoken a lot, Marshall.
Well, no, I'm just taking it all in, and what it brings to mind is, I guess it's the feeling of like the truth of the, universal unity and non-separateness, which is truth, and then the separation that beings create because of conventionality or convenience. It's just it's very self-motivated, and that's spirituality. That's the beauty in it, and that's something that Sujatu and myself have really been working to cultivate, and hence the work that we do, and spread that to others, and so other people can engage in that practice and open up new worlds, whether they be spiritual worlds or just worlds of human community and compassion, resources, and spirituality, whatever form that might take on. And every human being's vision and version of spirituality is different, because we all come to it in different ways and we experience life differently. And so this conversation, it really is like awakening different parts of my mind and my experience, and it's refreshing. And I'm really just happy to have you here and listen to both of you speak. And I know it's like Sujatu is excited. I know when Sujatu is excited, you might not see it on him on the surface, but I can. He's like a puppy underneath there. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I am very, very grateful. I wasn't sure whether you asked you, because it was, it's a different format to it. But I was excited. I've been talking about it.
We were excited too.
Because I think it's all part of this. It's all part of the diversity of what we're trying to do. It was. I think we're getting somewhere near time, and I try and stick to half hour, although my clock's disappeared. That was a hint, by the way. Thank you. We've got a couple of minutes left. Before I forget, I always try and say to folks, if there's anything you've got going on, any organisations, any events you're doing, maybe that's not so relevant for you guys, but if there is anything you wanted to you wanted to plug at all, please feel free to.
Okay, well, if anyone is interested in studying the scriptures, the biblical scriptures, we have a Zoom class on Tuesday evenings at 6:30 Eastern Time, and anyone would be welcome to attend that. They can reach me on Facebook. I'm at Jim DeFrancisco, DEFRANCISCO, and anyone is welcome to contact me if they're interested in or have any questions about that.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you. And I'd just like to add to that, I couldn't actually recommend that highly enough. I was I was very much almost anti anything to do with Christianity because of my perception of it for all those years. And having been fortunate enough to be able to listen to you, Jim, with certainly with your, it's the teachings of Christ was the big one for me, an alternative there. So I would thoroughly recommend it to anyone, and I would certainly say, go to anything with an open mind, for sure. Well, I guess we've got a few seconds left. We try and keep it to the 30 minutes. So, Marshall, you've got nothing else to start?
I just thank you. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you both so much. I will obviously see you later tonight, but thank you so much. It really has been a pleasure. So, thank you.
It's our pleasure. Thank you.
Our pleasure too. Thank you.
Blessings.